attendance?
Yep, will do.
So I ask everyone to rise for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have anybody signed up for open forum?
There was one, but he stepped out, I think, restroom.
Oh, okay.
I take it SRC's not on.
No, they couldn't get it on in time, so.
Some kind of legality or something.
Yep, so we're gonna have that next week. Oh, Dan, can you grab the open forum?
Yep.
Sorry, buddy. Coming down pretty good out there now.
We need it.
I don't need it all at once, so slow it down.
This is true.
Thank you. Matt Fischenbauer is not here right at the moment.
Coming with a child, it looks
I think so, so. Now we can wait a minute. If not, we'll move on and call him later.
Hopefully it's not raining when we do our stormwater tour.
Go where?
So hopefully it's not raining when we do our stormwater tour.
Oh.
September 11th.
Matt Fischenbauer, open forum, please. All right.
They were all sitting out there and all of a sudden they ran out and they got a kid. How'd that happen?
How you doing, Matt?
Good. How you guys?
Real good. We're ready for you at open forum.
Oh, okay. All right. Didn't know I was gonna head out, that's why Mom and Dad are here to help. So everybody's getting out to work. So, I think I'd like to ask some advice from the council on, I don't know what everybody would want to know, but it was advised to me from Don.
Hey, Matt. If you could state your name and address for the record first.
Yeah, Matt Faschingbauer, 9595 228th Street, Forest Lake, 55025.
Thank you.
Should I keep going?
Go right ahead.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So I have a business in Forest Lake, for anybody who's not aware. It's a small automotive shop off 61, right next to Wells Fargo there. And what we're looking to do is, that address is 308 Lake Street South. There's another one off the main drag, 308 Lake Street North. I'm working with the owner to sell me that property with actually the house next to it and the house next to that. So this is all right next door to the Lighthouse Lofts. And so yeah, we're working out. We've worked out an agreement to where if I accept the terms that we get to proceed, and I'm leaning on it enough that that's why I'm here. But I just want to make sure that I'm not tripping over any anything in terms of this city or anything like that. So we intend to get all that, and then we actually intend to as a phase 2 develop the property itself to maybe some type of a we were thinking more of like a business retail, something that can like complement something like the Lighthouse Lofts going in there. If it's business condos or business condos with some retail, but that's the idea, and that's kind of our reason for wanting to do that. And as everybody knows, there's the construction going on right next door. It is a matter of time before Steve follows through on the rest of that, which includes our building there as well. So that's it. We want to stay in Forest Lake, and we saw that as a development opportunity over there as well.
No, that'd be great. Best wishes. What
if there's anything you're looking from the city, would definitely want to talk to you about it. We do have a person on staff, Donovan Hart is his name, he's our zoning and development. He could go over what it currently is zoned at, what the future zoning is gonna be, if it's gonna change at all. I don't think it is, but I believe, it's more than suitable for what you're describing. So I would just suggest, to call up to the city, ask for Donovan, and you can set up a meeting, discuss with him what you're planning on doing, and see how it works with everything.
I did that already, and he
Okay.
recommended I come out here and just to make sure that, that nobody else had any qualms with it, so.
Yeah, I think it, as long as it meets the zoning requirements that are there, I don't think, I don't have any hesitations for it.
No,
so.
and I would think the next step for this gentleman would be the planning commission probably, with some sort of, at least a basis for what you're gonna do there for building size and that kind of thing.
So, what do I do to do that?
Well, you'd have to have a sketch or, it doesn't have to be architectural drawings, but more of a building size versus,
More of a concept,
yeah, concept drawing, something, what you're planning on there, so, they can look at it, make sure you have adequate parking, setbacks, things like that, but, I guess that would be the next step to go, but typically, that's always done with whoever your architect or, project engineer that you would hire to do it would be as well.
Okay. Is that just another department that I can reach out to, the planning commission? That's what you said, right?
Yeah.
Donovan kind of, the planning commission approves what comes up through there. Ryan, you're familiar with the property? It's right next to our water treatment facility and well. Is there any overlying easements or anything else that may hinder development there?
Easements and stuff like that, I don't know, but what I would recommend for you is to have what we refer to as pre-application meeting, and that would include Donovan, typically myself, and some other city staff members too, to talk about all the things because I don't know what you're proposing. I don't know if you're looking to purchase the building and operate out of the existing building, or are you looking to redevelop? I mean, it's gonna take you down two pathways. So we can talk about what that would require then, and some anticipation of steps you would have to fulfill and some of those potential costs to address moving forward, so. But I think having, some information given to us prior, then we'll come and meet with you
I think that's what.
and kind of go through that process, and then, like they mentioned, then eventually you go to planning commission and seek approval.
Okay, so
And then he'd be buying the
do
houses
that now or
behind
find
it.
the time to share with you the details?
I would request a meeting with Donovan to at least have myself there.
Okay.
I can help you with the technical aspects, the infrastructure and the permitting requirements, depending on what you're doing, or if you're simply just looking to purchase a building, operate out of the existing building.
Do you want the answers now or then?
If it's operated on the existing building, I think that would lie with building department and zoning. So,
Okay.
another person that should be at that meeting, it would be the building official.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mark.
I'm not sure the nature of the extent of what you're looking to do, but it's just hearing you talk and kind of hearing, it feels a little bit like you're kind of getting tossed a little bit back and forth. Doesn't Chris Ang at Washington County EDA have some resources available on, isn't this like a textbook case for, want to do a development, exploring options and kind of walking through the process? Isn't there some resources available to kind of help assist
Yeah,
with that?
there is. Washington County does have some resources. The one question I have is, you kind of mentioned, the full scope up there with like additional outside just the existing building that's there. Does that include the city land that's there as well, that little triangle piece? I mean, I guess what's the vision? Because, maybe that's, because I had a conversation with Donovan just kind of about this project, and there's a parcel that I'm not sure if you're looking at as part of this project or not, and, that kind of.
Out here?
So the city owns this
That,
piece.
it is part, it's not a make or break if we cannot, get that, but yeah, that's part of the development plan. So to answer the question, then it's two
Right.
phases. Phase one is take over, and continue operating our total auto care business out of the commercial location. And, phase two is then developing the rest of that, if not total auto care as well.
And part of the rest of that is city-owned, is that what I understand?
Yeah, so there was one little parcel, I think I can pull it up here, just to get a quick visual of what it looks like. So I believe this little triangle right here, this 355, is actually city-owned at this point. And if they're looking at a full redevelopment, you're looking at potentially purchasing land. I mean, I guess that's kind of maybe where Donovan kind of said, talk to council at first, was basically if you're looking at doing the whole, group, before you kind of invest a lot of resources into something, is kind of seeing if there's any interest in selling that piece of property, looking at it. I don't know how the city acquired that or, why we have that, but it is currently owned by the city. If you're looking at just strictly the, taking operations of the existing business, so that's a different kind of path. But the redevelopment potentially has the, from what I'm hearing, the purchase of that land from the city as part of the project.
Correct. So the 3 parcels from this seller, and then that triangular one is this city. By what I understand, looking at that picture, I can barely see up there. But yeah, that's that's part of the project plan that we've been planning out.
So there'd be one other parcel left not owned on that block by you, is that how I'm kind of interpreting it, number 32?
Correct.
So you're looking at purchasing the 32, the 20, and then the number 8, correct?
Correct. And then if the city is selling the 335.
What about 308? That's owned by Stark too.
Basically, everything that Stark, it's one big package deal. So,
Stark owns 4 parcels.
yeah.
The city owns 1.
We want that to go together, right? I mean,
What's that?
unless there's, better understand why we ended up with 355, but absent,
Yeah.
you want it to go together.
Right, I mean, I would see no reason that we need to keep it for anything. It may prove beneficial to do more of a joint water treatment, with your development, if it comes to that. Maybe we do a little larger water treatment, encompass some of the city's area, but I guess we'd have to defer to Ryan when it comes down to that. I think it's a little early to try and do that, but I guess if there's any hesitation by anybody on the council. Ed?
No, but Matt, I would suggest you consult Mr. Stegner, seeing as he's gone through a very similar thing with his project, and he could probably save you a lot of time.
Okay.
And the other thing is, the question might come up as far as TIF, as far as tax relief for you. Mr. Stegner qualified, so that would be another issue. But I strongly suggest you consult with him, and, because he's been through it.
Great. Yeah, that's basically the extent that, those are the 2 phases that we've been thinking through. We just want to make sure that, the council was okay with auto repair to continue in that same location, or at the, whichever parcel that falls under there, but that is a mixed use, until we can do the development of the rest of it as well too, but that being, again, business condos like, so.
Yeah, just going by the development next door, I mean, I think we would look at reasonable business hours, but I think you have those now. I mean, if it was a 24/7 type operation, it might, have light interference, other things with the new building next door, so, but.
Seems as
Mara?
I was just gonna say, just make sure we're covering all bases. I guess before I'm fully comfortable, I'd like to understand why we ended up with 355, just to make sure there's nothing planned related to treatment center next door, or just anything that why. It'd be good to have that history just to clear, but yes, we're comfortable, we would be comfortable.
I think it's a really good reason why they have to have that meeting with the department heads there, and, you know, with the engineer and Donovan again, and get that all worked out. You know, so you can send it off to the planning commission, because they'd be studying that also,
Great,
so.
all right.
I would definitely like to be involved as well, because that development will box in the water plant.
Yes.
So we just want to make sure we
Yep.
plan accordingly for.
Of course.
Future access and all that, so. I mean, it's a great idea, I just want to make sure that we don't completely box ourselves in there and just for future growth and operation, so.
Yep.
Well, that's why I'm here. So, okay, so, put a call in to say Donovan tomorrow and see if we can find a time with, you, Ryan, and Dave. That's all
I'm
right?
available whenever.
Okay. Anything else you guys have for me or that I can do for you?
Well, I guess I'm just looking at the abandoned roadway there, and, you know, maybe instead of just selling one parcel, maybe we just reconfigure the lines to get us more square footage by the water treatment plant and give them more of the abandoned roadway.
Kind of a similar parcel swap like we did with Pratt.
Correct, yeah. So, 'cause that whole diagonal strip used to be Highway 61 at one time, but, you know, that's just green area right now, so.
1938.
Earlier than that, probably, but.
Yeah. That's when they poured it.
That would help with the project all the more, really, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right. Anything else that, anybody has for me, or I can maybe do for any of you?
I look forward to seeing you here again with plans and give you the go-ahead.
Good luck.
Good luck.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.
You too.
All right, that takes us on to 2019 State Aid Street Project from Ryan.
So basically, all we have in here is one figure tonight.
I'll pull it up.
That's in the packet.
You gonna have it on the big screen?
I will in just
Okay.
one second.
Thanks, Dan.
Just let me get it downloaded.
Page 2.
And we're just bringing up this specific spot as this has kind of been a lingering topic, but then a request somewhat from the park board on incorporating additional parking at Bell's. So if you remember, we went through an exercise in the last year that looked at restriping 11th Avenue and accommodating traffic, parking on the south side versus the north side. Kind of after going through that exercise and seeing the costs involved, there were a lot of safety concerns and issues that we did do some public outreach with the residents along there. It brought up some valid points for us to investigate further. Right now, parking is on the north side of 11th Avenue, southeast, there, that stretch that goes from South Shore out to 61. It does give that reaction area for drivers backing out of driveways or kids playing right off the back of the curb. And then vice versa on the south side of the road on 11th Avenue, you got that sidewalk there for that buffer. Now, if you put parking on the south side of the road next to the sidewalk, then the traffic heading westbound on 11th Street Southeast would be right up against the curb line to get the adequate lane spacing. And then thus, you know, after all the concerns we heard from the public in that, and then the costs that we got a quote, what it would just do to restripe everything, we just started putting some alternate concepts out there for discussion and had some good conversation with it, but it just really never was finalized. And if this is something really the city wants to incorporate into the state aid project when we're right here and there next year, this is the time we kind of need to kind of have that nod whether to incorporate this, because to get plans and specs ready for early bids, you know, to accommodate for surveying, and then also, you know, just permitting and stuff like that. So the 2019 state aid project will include Centennial, 11th Street Southeast, 15th Street Southeast, and 11th Avenue Southeast and 15th Avenue Southeast, and 11th Street Southeast heading down to BP gas station area. Majority of that work, obviously, we'll look at the pavement, depending on the soil borings and stuff like that. Is it a full depth reclamation? Does it need, or a mill and overlay in some spots? But I think the majority of it's probably a full depth reclamation. That's what we budgeted for, so new pavements throughout. Spot pairs on the curb and gutter, we'll have to do an infrastructure assessment to make sure underground stuff is if it needs repairs or not. All sidewalk crossings where ped ramps exist need to be upgraded to ADA compliance. I will review other intersections to make safe crossings. We won't extend sidewalk off these streets, you know. Particular here at the intersection of South Shore Trail and 11th Street Southeast, we talked about obviously making that a three-way stop, but then also you had a sidewalk on one side of the road, but kids don't have anywhere to go. What we would do in this case, we would look at to provide a landing across the road on the designated crosswalk so they could get across the road. But at this time with this project and budget, we wouldn't be chasing sidewalk down other roadways. When we got to 15th Streets, we'll be removing the 4-foot sidewalk that has a lot of nice jumps on it right now. And because that was an old county road, much wider than we need it to be, we'll shrink the road width there and then put a 10-foot trail there that will connect into your Safe Routes to School project from 2015, and then look at running a trail down 11th Street Southeast too. And just kind of closing in on the loops, you'll be able to connect the parks, the schools, and some of the neighborhoods then with those facilities. But the question that's not really been budgeted for is some sort of parking here. In front of you, at this project alone, it does include the sidewalk replacement along South Shore here too. Then it'll tie into the new sidewalk with the St. Peter's Church redevelopment site, and then our Safe Routes to School project. A lot of the park plans that they've been talking about with Bells Park don't probably include 2 ball fields here. You know, that's all not finalized. You know, I haven't been in tune with all those conversations, but I've seen some concepts that they've shown. So they were supportive of the parking as kind of something like here. You can see it would encroach into their space. Thus, you could shift that parking one way or even add more if you wanted to. But as shown, if you probably bidded that project alone, you're probably looking at a $80,000, $85,000 project right here. If you bidded, just playing with the bid unit pricing, rolled it into a larger street project, you know, you obviously, the mobilization, traffic control get fluffed out over everything. You're probably looking at a $60,000 to $65,000 conservative project right here. We could bid it in the base bid, we could bid it as an alternate, you know, those are options too. So if it did come out to, you want it totally separated, we could keep it separated depending on sources of funding for it. But really the question on the table tonight is, you know, should this be included in the plans and specs, you know? Because the process I would have to go through, the surveying and the permitting for this with the other project, and then you could bid it, and then let's just say the bids came in at 100 and you didn't want to award it, and if it was an alternate, you would just award the base bid. If it was low pricing, and whether the city funds were to pay for this or park funds were to pay for this, you could then, you know, award the base bid plus alternate one. It's just thinking ahead, if we want to incorporate it into the project based on the whole exercises we've gone through the last year and the project that's in the neighborhood, and then obviously funding. So just want to talk about it early.
So,
I'll just, might give a little background to Parks discussions on these.
Yeah. Sure. Some Parks questions.
So the Parks Commission currently has been discussing redoing Belts Park as the next thorough project. One of the things that we've been dealing with is no parking for the facility. Generally, people are parking on St. Peter's. If you were to bring it up on your own screen, you can pan right and see the parking lot is right at the edge. That's church parking lot property, and there's been talks about giving a goodwill kind of donation or offering to the church for the public use of that. But it was really desirable to have their own parking. And I had talked to Jamie about this style design, and she got working with Ryan, and it seems like you guys made some good headway. Like you said, mentioning tying it into the street project, you're saving immensely on mobilization, but with this park being the next one they want to redo, this is one of the things they need to address is actual parking. The park's not very accessible. There's gates in there. Can't really get strollers through. So having off-street parking and being able to be moving the sidewalk in, and you have an opportunity to provide gate, easy, safe access. You don't have people crossing the street with children and those kinds of things. So there's a lot of support in the Parks Commission to do something there, and this seems like the best option. It would be nice by the Parks budget if we could roll this into the street project and not have to do it out of their funds.
So this concept shows 14 spaces. Obviously, some of the other conversation we've had about was to accommodate a handicap space or two. That's easy. You could shrink it, and you could make it bigger. You know, if 65,000 seems high, we could shrink it and reduce it, and, or you can even go bigger if you wanted to, but.
Ed?
Yeah, I just don't think it gives you enough bang for your buck. If you didn't have that and you continue to park on the street, you'd probably get 10 cars out along the street. So you're spending almost $85,000 to pick up 4 more parking spaces essentially. And then I really don't like the idea of people backing out into a street.
Now, it's currently not striped to park on the park side of the street, correct?
No.
So
Sean, isn't that a parked car showing up there?
Well, they,
that'd be illegally parked, I believe.
2-hour parking.
2-hour parking?
you could put paint marks on the ground, but there was no like designated paint mark spaces. You know, there are some things in here that parks could do, but like I said, if you did bid it as an alternate, maybe it comes in at 50. You either award it or you don't, but if you start
only oth-
something and have to come
sorry.
back at the end and we add that, then that's when, we see higher pricing.
Yeah, the only thing I want to mention was the fact that even if it's a mutual agreement with the St. Peter's parking there, that's a really steep hill going from the parking lot down into that park there.
Yes.
In fact, as the kids slide down there in the wintertime, you know, and it's not an ideal situation either way. So, you know, if we can figure out something there, but it just seems to me that if it's bid as an alternate, at least you have an opportunity to look at it and say, either way, you know, yay or nay.
So Ed, you mentioned there was room for 10 cars. Is that how many spots are able to, I mean?
I'm just guessing.
you're-
But
you're
you got that
guessing.
triangle that's not used and
14 on there.
I'm assuming you'd be close.
14 would be the proposed new. What's existing on street today?
Oh, I don't know that, I guess.
Just take your footage and figure out I think your bonus though is,
I mean, are we really adding parking spots is my question.
No, not enough for $85,000.
I think
And that was
your-
gonna be my next question is, with the park being redeveloped, what's the planned need for that park? I mean, does this all get torn up because we find out we need, 40 spots, or I don't know what
Well, and
that-
I think that's where I was gonna go is until we see, more of a working concept of what's planned there, maybe there is a better way to just, have a drive-in and a parking lot maybe in the backside. I don't know, I would like to see the whole thing, but I guess my concern is more than, is this a good project or not, but, how about snow plowing? Does that affect, having that dive in there? Dave, not really too much, or?
just another added thing. I mean, we'll be there to plow the rink every time it snows. I mean, I do see that option as well. I mean, if you knew what you were going to be doing for that park, I mean, a pull-in with a parking lot off-street where you're not backing back out in the traffic, and I just haven't seen, a master plan of what they're kind of thinking.
Right.
I think I've seen some just like draft kind of back of napkin sketch plans for it, and I don't think they envisioned parking in there because I think it impacted fields, the baseball fields, even when they were laid back out. But again, it wasn't like a formal, I think it was just kind of, wasn't to scale, it was just kind of like some ideas as to what could be done for this particular space.
Parking has always been an issue that I've been informed, and it's something the commission wants to address, but just never knew how. And that's why the discussion was about giving money to St. Peter's. If they're doing contribution, I'd like to see it spent on the city infrastructure. Parks is willing to chip in on it. Of course, they'd like to keep their budget first. But I've seen this utilized, it works well. It's fairly easy to plow, and it doesn't impact the area. If you were to put in a drive-in parking area, you could maybe get a half-dozen parking area that would take up, if you want to look at the size of the baseball diamond. Just to have a driveway and then enough room to bring vehicles in and back in and out. It takes up more of the usable green space out there. There aren't any concrete plans as far as what they want to do with the park and the design. There's just a bunch of preliminaries. But parking's been a constant part of the discussion. It kind of impacts what they want to do as well. And if you can see the fence line that's already there, which would be the baseball field diamond, your hash line there, the parking wouldn't impede on that very much. So it's not gonna rob any of the green space. Currently in the middle of the parking, proposed parking stalls, here's where I believe where they get in for floating rinks. So it would give you, an opportunity to put an apron in there and a decent way to drive in and out.
Well, and another huge bonus to doing this would be to extend that sidewalk. Right now, we have to switch pieces of equipment just to do this one section of sidewalk, cause it's a 4-foot piece. So I mean, just to get a 6-foot sidewalk through there would be a massive improvement just for, you know, if you wanna talk snow plowing, then we have to actually drive one piece of equipment just to do that. 500 feet worth of sidewalk and then drive back and then get back in the skid steer, so. And, yeah, to Blaine's point, it's not that difficult to plow, you just swoop in there and push it up to that bull nose and.
If there's any cleanup, your sidewalk machine can take care of anything actually coming through.
Yeah, and the parking spot would be nice in the winter because as you can kinda see from the aerial, it gets beat up really bad because right now our off-street parking for the winter for the rinks, they actually drive through the gate and they park in the grass and then it gets warm out for a day and then they chew it up and
You get stuck out there yet?
we've been stuck out there. I'm not gonna say I have been, but.
So just a couple more questions going along with this. If, you'd mentioned widening the sidewalk, but then also a 10-foot trail? We'd have both?
No, just in this area, we would have we'd remove the 4-foot sidewalk from where the Safe Routes to School concrete project stopped to the redevelopment site of St. Peter's Church. And we would replace that with a 6-foot wide sidewalk, which is our city standard.
Okay.
And then, but along 15th Street Southeast, you have that existing 4-foot sidewalk on the south side of the road. But remember that road really wide because of it was a county road and part of Turnback, where we can shrink and pull up that curb and then allow for a 10-foot trail on the back side of that, south side of that, which would connect into that bituminous trail by the cemetery, which then takes us, you know, up to the high school and junior high. But then also get you over to the next park that's east there at 11th Street Southeast and 15th. And then, but then the trail would continue back to 97. But then there's existing sidewalk then that takes you up through, what's the name of that road that curves right away? Bay Drive. So now they got access to stuff too. So just continuing the network, it's just, and then utilizing, you don't need such a wide road either.
The other question I have, on the north side of that street, is there parking there now, allowed?
On the east side here on South Shore,
On the, I don't know if that. I
North
guess
side
it'd
of
be north-
11th.
The north side of 11th.
north side of 11th, yes,
So would that parking remain?
yes.
But is it, Dan, can you pan the computer screen over that way? There's quite a few driveways, it's also on a hill, so there's a bit of a blind spot if you're actually driving through there. It's not somewhere you'd really like to see kids crossing the street.
No, what I'm saying is that's what's gonna happen. You're gonna have, if there is parking over there, the kids are, people are still gonna park there, and their kids will cross that street.
I think people who use the park frequently will park along South Shore's curb right now, because up on 11th Avenue, that's a significant amount higher than when you come into the park. And you gotta park on the north side now, so they would have to cross the street to get to the sidewalk and then come down the steep hill, so that's why I think a lot of people that use it frequently park along South Shore Drive. Or the church.
Yeah, the property's kind of bowl-shaped with, South Shore Drive being the low entrance point. Otherwise, the other three sides are uphill.
And part of the project, because of the concerns when you're heading north on South Shore and take a left on 11th Street Southeast, you're coming uphill. And in the summertime, often looking right into the sun too. You know, they'll peel around that corner, but we'll be making this a 3-way stop.
I was gonna mention that because you don't have to stop when you're going one direction there, and that's not good.
And
It's
it's
just-
so awkward.
Yeah,
You know,
it is
I drive it all the
awkward.
time and I still guess what drivers might be thinking or wanting to do in that intersection. So,
Is there any opportunity with the redevelopment of that park that those baseball fields could shift
They will
further
be,
to the south so that you could put parking, angle parking all the way along that stretch?
I think some of the plans that I've seen in discussions don't include 2 ball fields in the future.
I believe they wanted to go to 1 ball field, but nonetheless, if you see the current ball fields there and that fence that comes across the fence line, the parking ramp would only come up into it. So you'd be bumping 6 feet with that sidewalk farther past that existing fence, which will be torn out in the process of redoing the park. And having some parking there really kind of, this is the least disruptive design that you can come up with.
But if, what I'm saying is if they're thinking about giving them a baseball field, I'm looking for the most parking for the money that, along that
Sure,
road.
well, if you think about it, my pickup is 20 feet long. You're gonna need to leave about 5 feet on each end, so you're looking at 30 feet long for a decent parking stall between vehicles versus a 9 foot wide sideways, so if you're turning them all angled, it might not look like a lot, but it's a significant amount more parking. And then you also.
Still only 14 vehicles.
And that's what Ryan was talked about, we can expand that, and you had kind of mentioned too, we can go bigger with that if you wanted. I don't know the setback from the next intersection, but you could definitely expand that to encompass more of the park.
And Parks is okay with that?
Yeah, it's the least impact that you could do for design without having, try to corner a parking lot somewhere, and then it's a lot that Public Works has to send a truck out to plow a single lot. This way, it's, 1 more pass the wing down. And when you look at 14 spots, it's one of those things that you don't want to go overboard. You don't need to put, 30 spots there. A baseball game might fill them all up, but your average user isn't going to, probably packing more than 14 cars in there. I don't know, Dave, you see it a lot busier than that?
Not a lot more, but just in talking with Ryan too, I think it'd be a good idea to see, what would it be to add 5 more spots? I mean, if in between, like, if we wanna include this in the bid package, and then Parks and PLT talks about this and says, yeah, we wanna put the baseball field over here, well then, maybe if you can add another 10 spots for minimal amount, then it'd be definitely, worth adding that more spots. I think 14 would be fine if you don't have a set idea of what that park's gonna look like.
Yeah, I think the first option was smaller than that, Ryan, right? The first talk was just a couple.
This was an option, and then another option pushed it out into the road, but then we get really concerned about the road width out there. We could add spots, you could shrink, but it's really up to you. This is just a concept. Even if you bidded it like this, and at the date of construction, you wanted something bigger or smaller, depending on where the park group might get to, we could write a change order and, add, delete to the contract.
Another question I had, the outline of those baseball fields, am I looking at is that encompassing the outfield?
Yeah, those are horrible.
Is that the whole field?
That's-
What I'm leading up to, if those fields could shift to the south far enough that you could add a lane, almost like they did at the elementary school over here to park buses, when they put that in. So there's an actual drive lane and they park, but they don't park on the street. They don't come right off the street.
Well, and I don't think those are competition grade baseball fields.
No, but what I'm saying is there enough land there that you can shift them to the south?
Well, I think we're in the middle of these 2 ball fields is where the ice rinks are, and they're kind of there because of the existing warming house and water supply to fill the rinks. What I've seen on the concept is there is no ball field in that, on the left side of the screen. It's playground equipment. And then on the right side, it was a reconfigured youth league little field.
So, Ed, you're wondering if they could,
I'm wondering if you could put a road to the south of where he's got the angled parking things now? Actually put a road in there and then you'd angle them all towards the street.
I got
When you
you,
leave, you have an entrance, you have an exit.
I got you.
And that way you don't interfere, you don't pull into the street, you don't
With the
interfere.
one-way.
It's just exactly the way they park the school buses over at
Yeah,
on 12th.
that makes
over there.
sense.
I see.
Now that you explain it,
A
that makes sense.
one-way street coming in.
Yeah, a one-way street on one end coming in, you'd have all the angled parking spaces and you pull it out on the other end.
I'm afraid that's gonna take up a lot, you know.
But I don't know if
extra-
there's enough land there.
Extra 12
That's why I'm asking that question.
I mean, that does start to impact the design capabilities, and then you're adding cost to it. I don't see too much of a problem backing out at angled parking.
During the day, that road isn't that busy. I mean,
No.
early morning and the, you know.
You only got to
part of the
back
evening.
over one child.
In the evening,
Oh, but the sidewalk is.
Sidewalks in front of
I
the
know,
parking
but there's still
stalls.
gonna be people, people cross the easiest
People
way.
cross
They're gonna
wherever
park
they
their
go.
car on the other side and cut across.
Well, where I've seen it used, most people come in, will be using it for, at the parks. They pull in, they get out, their kids don't have to walk across the street, they just walk in front of the vehicle onto the sidewalk to the park. You'll still have a person or two, I suppose, that'll be on the other side, but if you got, I mean, human nature's lazy, you're gonna drive around the shopping mall parking lot to find the closest one. Someone will definitely make a U-turn and come back to park on the same side.
Well, and St. Peter's will still get used for parking too. I guess, what does it cost to put the plans together?
It'll just, if you do this part of the overall plans and specs, this little portion will be so minimal,
Okay.
because we're already in the area. You're gonna have relatively all the same bid items already in the plans and specs part of the base bid, so all those specifications will already be included.
So the last question I have, and I don't know if anybody can answer it tonight, but if a business wanted to come into town, could they put the same type of parking? Or are we doing something that our own codes don't allow us to do?
I
Good
was gonna
question.
ask, Spears, do we have anywhere else, to piggyback on your question, is there anywhere else in the city where we have parking like this right now?
We're gonna have some on Second Street.
Yeah, Lighthouse Lofts is building that in a second.
Oh, there we go.
Well, but that's, I look at Second Street as being a much different for utilization than South Shore. South Shore in the evening, when there's games at the fields, it's busy, and it's just a throughway anyway, and then add a game in the evening,
And
and,
then add children running between cars.
yeah.
Like, that's just not,
You got
that's a
residential,
recipe for
you got residential on
disaster.
the east side of that, never.
Backing out into traffic makes me nervous.
I still look at this as a safer option than what's there.
There's gonna be a four-way stop at the corner, so we're not dealing with, that, the closest lane of traffic is not gonna be clipping along there very fast like it is now, because now for the people going south, they don't have to,
They don't have to stop. That's right, they don't have to stop.
we got a three-way stop there, you know, they're not gonna be going more than 20, 25. I mean, that's still fast enough to do a lot of damage, but
Conceivably, they're stopped right now though, right? Because southbound does have to stop today.
no.
I would make the recommendation where that black car is,
Southbound stops?
Not northbound.
Not
southbound
northbound,
stops.
okay.
where the black car is parked there, to make that a no parking zone, just so you eliminate the blind spot for people who are doing angled backing. That way they can see the whole line of traffic as soon as they ease out.
As much parking as we're gaining.
Well, you're looking at 3, 4 vehicles there tops, because you can't park so close to the intersection, and that's where we could extend it. And look at extending it to the south farther. Which, it's an issue that Parks, Trails and Lakes have been looking at for a while, and being able to tandem it with the project makes the cost a lot less.
I guess I'm okay with including it as an alternative, but I don't really see any reason to proceed with it until we have some fairly solid plans with what Parks, Lakes, and Trails wants to do with the whole area. Maybe having this much of a concept, they can build around it, or.
This definitely helps, and
Yeah. Well,
say, one of the things is they could go more, they could go less, they're just looking for.
I would like to see, you know, more, especially if we're, you know, $60,000 for 14 spots seems
They were
to me
afraid of-
quite high.
They're afraid of asking for too much. It initially was more or less the impression I got.
I'm hoping we can get 25 stalls for under 50, but, you know, we'll see where, and
I was just curious if, the road's so wide now, if you were to, just assume you could extend this whole park into the road, into the parking lane of the road.
We looked at that.
Is that doable?
It's-
And then you could have enough room, because it's the same amount of room, then you could put your drive lane through and you could park them all on angles
And your
And go out
through
the back.
traffic on South Shore gets tight.
It's too tight.
It's tight. I mean, like right now, if somebody's backing out,
But you wouldn't be backing out onto the road, you'd be,
no, we looked at
They have a
shifting it
drive-through.
out, so it didn't, the sidewalk didn't come into the play field so much, and then tapered the curb out starting at the corner. But then you kind of pinch everything in that area, and then there's not much more allowable reaction time than at that point. Right now, you got pretty adequate spacing distance. So in the event somebody was backing out and wasn't paying attention, they would have an area to kind of swerve.
no, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you could use up part of the roadway, but angle think of these things
Oh, stripe.
angled the other way,
Stripe a center line offset.
and then have have a road behind it.
Have a
So-
one-way street that would bump into the park.
Exactly.
I get what you're saying.
See what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying.
You're
You'd have-
not, you're gaining more parking, safer parking, but you're giving up one lane of roadway.
Oh, yeah, you'd have to do a U-turn.
Where would you have to do a U-turn?
Dave said if you're headed northbound on North Shore, how would you get into it? You'd have to do a U-turn to come back.
Just have to turn 90 and drive into it.
You know, Ed, that might be an easier way to keep, I guess, things safer, but there's that much more grading and road base to prepare. So I think that'd probably be a cost Ryan could do.
That's gonna be
Comment
the big
on.
issue, would be the cost.
At this point, you're kind of keeping the curb edge. You don't have to touch the asphalt that's already there. You're just gonna do from curb to sidewalk. And then you're gonna have to
I'm
do,
just thinking if you're gonna spend money on it, do it right the first time. Don't create another safety hazard.
But if we're really looking at, spending $60,000 on this, plus maintenance on it every year, it might be even smarter just to, look at the St. Peter's parking lot and work out some type of joint agreement with them where we pay them a certain amount every year for the use of their parking lot versus,
And then use some of that money to improve whatever kind of walkway you need to go down that slope.
That'd be the issue there, because that hill is so steep there,
Like
people would be,
grading could be fixed, or you could do something.
But you could
to
do something.
Do something.
Yeah.
inevitably, the solution is to get safer parking. You know, if we find something that isn't like this, it's gonna be a
and then that
win.
would still leave you with, 15 parking spots
Along the road.
parallel along the road. So,
I mean, I'd like to see it as an alternate, maybe work it up to 20 parking spots just to try to get more bang for the buck.
I think we should also look at the possibility of adding a stairway or whatever it takes to get up onto that parking lot, because,
Accessible.
as an alternative, because, that doesn't make sense. This, I mean,
well, and we could have a stairway, but we could also, because this is the lower point here, have a couple of
course,
handicap
certainly.
parking stalls right
Of course.
on the street right there.
absolutely.
One
Yeah.
issue I perceive putting a stairway is you're putting city infrastructure on private property then. If you put a stairway up to the parking lot for,
Well, you'd have to work out some side of an
You'd have to
agreement
work
with
out
it,
an
because,
agreement.
Partner with them to-
because they're still looking for safe parking, and that's all there is to it.
they might be open to it, but
And I mean, I think, with the school right there, they get some benefit of having the park.
Right.
And using the park, and maybe when the park is designed, we get their input on it too, to make sure that, equipment matches some
I
of their
don't,
needs.
I don't think it'd
But
be
I
something we can't overcome.
Yeah,
I just,
I really think that we'd be a lot better off not spending that much on that, but just coming up with a way to work with them.
I disagree. I've seen it work very well on a couple different parks. I would just like to ask for the option to have it as a bid alternate, just to see where it comes in at.
I'm fine with having it as an alternate.
Yeah.
So,
Just so Parks Commission can know this is an option, this is what it costs, and we can explore the other options and see.
well,
how
they're all all alternatives to the bid. I mean, you could alternate 1, 2, 3, 4, right on down the line. And I think we should look at them all.
From an engineering standpoint, Ryan, do you see any other good solutions?
I think what I would recommend right now is, so our tentative schedule is we would come to the September 10th meeting and do the processes that we typically do and authorize plans and specs at that meeting, which then will accommodate survey and stuff like that before snowfall, right? And then in the meantime, I think we should work closely with parks and keep the city council updated at workshops of what we might be exploring. Because you also don't want to get to a bid package that does have a base bid and 4 major alternates. Because potentially, you're going to shift the bids, right? And when you're doing something like that, it's, you know, one thing if they're really little alternates and stuff like that, but depending on how you award the contractor, you might flop something around and some of the pricing, so I'd rather like wanna narrow it down, because we wouldn't come back until the December, January meeting, basically to approve plans and specs and authorize that for bid, which would allow a February, bid award, so we would probably open bids into January, or right before the first meeting in February. That way we can award in February, get our contracts in place, then we'll be one of the few earlier projects bidded before they get full again. But, so that's what I would recommend now, you know, we don't have to have a final decision, but I think right now there's some sense of wanting this as an alternate, but not defined yet.
Yeah, I think if you work with Parks, Lakes, and Trails a little bit, but as an alternative, I'm fine with that. Rest of the council,
Yeah, we have to look at some option there, no question about it.
definitely not included as a base package.
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay. You got what you need down on that one, Ryan, for now?
Nope.
All right, we'll move on to the middle school water reuse grant application.
Is there anything else you guys wanted to see from the Parks Commission in regards to?
Well, I'd like to see.
Where are they with their plan for redeveloping that park?
I mean, they've been talking for about 3 years on.
You know, they got the high school team working on it, they got,
Yep, so we got input from them.
but do they have anything on paper saying this is what we want?
I'll have to ask Jamie again, to revisit this, because they had addressed a couple other issues at last meeting. One of the things they talked about also was putting in, I guess this is kind of relevant to the parking, but they're putting in an addition or a new warming house. They were talking about wanting to do, water and sewer to have a bathroom out there. I was thinking, if we're gonna spend the investment to put water and sewer there, and an addition on the building, I think it'd be wise to do an actual pavilion that could be rented out, used for community gatherings. So if it's gonna be heated all year round, and it's gonna be heated in the wintertime and has plumbing, you might as well make it usable, something that, the public would use more than just in the wintertime.
I'm just thinking it'd be nice to see a concept plan of the park, then work parking around that, you know.
So I mean,
And things,
if,
facilities, bathrooms, that.
yeah,
like,
so
kinda
if,
see the whole thing.
if we had an actual pavilion there, that would be rented out for, you know, events, birthday parties, picnics, whatever, having that parking that's dedicated there would make it easier too. That's kind of where I was thinking. I don't see the point of putting water and sewer in for something that's used 2 to 3 months a year.
The biggest problem I see with Belts Park is the fact that it's not a big area.
No.
It's a pretty small area, and so, pretty hard, we can't get too grandiose on it, you know what I mean?
Nope. That's one of the things, there's so many ideas in such a small footprint. Due to the lay of the land though, there's gonna be a hill, so the upper area that is playground will most likely stay at that playground. Down below will be a ball field and ice rink that won't go anywhere, but I don't think there was 2 ball fields in there.
Well, I'd like the pavilion idea, possibly, you know, for the future, depending on what it costs and how much funds are in the park reserve. We got 1 sheet of ice there, we might as well look at, you know, 2 or something too, I mean, in the wintertime. But for right now, I guess, Ryan, would we need to stub any kind of storm sewer in there for, you know, like, it looks wet down there now, I mean, especially with all that, you know, ice and everything else. Would it be beneficial, as you're doing that package, to have some type of stub in, so we don't have to tear the street up in the future?
See, in the middle of the proposed parking lot, and a little to the right, the little square with the line running across the road, that's an existing storm sewer right there.
Dave, is that actually muddy or just torn up from wintertime use?
It's tore up for wintertime. When we pull the plastic off the rink, it goes right to South Shore. The whole thing drains right to the road, to that catch basin that Ryan's talking about.
But the,
Right to the right, right,
almost.
Warmer?
see, right there.
Right there.
Right there, yeah.
So we could stub that pipe, further west which would go behind the curb and could then put a beehive and then run drain tile fingers into that, if, depending on what park improvements there are. There's also some storm sewer on the northeast corner. On this picture would be your top left. You can see it too in the curb line there. You'd have to cut through some sidewalk, but you could get into there too. Sanitary sewer and water main both run through the property, right?
Oh, we have water running right up to the warming house for flooding.
Yes, sewer runs through here too.
I think so. I have to look at the map.
So like future public services, you know, those are already really right here.
Is this something like the council would like to see the Parks Commission come to a workshop on?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What, come with some kind of concept plan?
2 or 3 drawings and some possibilities.
Be easier, be better.
I'll talk to Jamie on that then.
I mean, they can just be rough drawings, they don't have to be architectural drawings.
No, but I mean, having interest here really helps give them an idea what to move into. Quick question for Ryan. The pork chop shape on the south side there, is that going to be a curb bump out? That would be parallel to the parking stall?
Excuse me. For grass, I mean, this is just a concept. Obviously, I'd work with Dave, what he would prefer, if maybe that had to be all concrete.
If, my thought, keeping it blacktop and maybe make that though a handicap parking spot. At least when the plow truck comes in, they can exit on the same kind of swoop versus having to back up or have a snow mountain there.
That's a good
And
idea.
Less concrete there too, so it might bring the bid down.
Easier to pave, better compaction. Get rid of that tight triangle spot.
I get a good idea once in a while.
Write her down.
All right, great. Should we move on, or any other questions on this subject? No, good.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so we got the middle school water reuse grant application.
Yep, so this is, just bringing this forth, is the Forest Lake Area Schools is interested in pursuing another Board of Water and Soil Resources Clean Water Fund grant for their second stormwater capture and reuse irrigation project in Forest Lake at the middle school. Similar to what we did with the high school in 2016, that's under construction now. They've already completed a feasibility study that has been completed by the Forest Lake Area Schools that identified the environmental benefit, overall cost of the project here at the middle school. And then Rice Creek Watershed District has agreed to pay for the application according to the attached interagency agreement. This agreement is nearly identical to the agreement signed for the high school project. Project also summarizes the financial contribution by each of the project partners, which is identical to the previously approved high school project agreement. And at the end, if we do get to construction with this grant, that's where the city then was asked to pay $25,000 for the other system, and same as with this one, and we have no ownership or maintenance with it though. The project also will provide a reduction in stormwater runoff volume entering Clear Lake, as well as reduced pollutant loading and groundwater usage to irrigate the current middle school. Project will result in further protection in Clear Lake and continue to support an effective partnership between the city of Forest Lake and Rice Creek and Forest Lake area schools. One thing that's gone over tremendously well in the school was the educational support that this curriculum was required to develop, part of the grant application and the interaction with the students that we've been ongoing there. So so that's kind of what I'm here to be the middleman, you know, between this, and remember the school district can't lead these applications, and that's why they need the city to be the conduit for that. So like right now with the high school grants, we're holding their grant money. When they get stuff done so far, then they can request reimbursement and we pay them out of the grant, but at the end of the day, the city's only cost was $25,000 with that high school reuse project. Is Rice Creek and the school district and the grant pay for everything else.
I had a question.
Go ahead.
Sounds oddly familiar to a MnDOT project. Did the school board sign that maintenance agreement yet?
They requested one. Bridget was working on updating the draft of the maintenance agreement, and we'll get it over to them for their review. But we don't have like the I haven't been told that they are gonna sign it for sure, but they have requested a maintenance agreement get sent over to them.
I went over and talked to him, to Dr. Massey, as I said I was going to. And at that time, there was some issues that they had to clear up with their legals apparently. That was the answer I got. So it's kind of a basic thing, but I don't know what the follow-up was after that. But I did go over and visit with him, so,
I talked to him about it as well.
sure.
I think, once we get that settled down, be worth looking at this. But I'd put our neck out there one piece at a time.
Yeah, the only thing about this, though, this is really a good idea. Anytime you're saving water out of the irrigation, the clean water, I think it's a good idea.
I read the packet, and I read the administrative part of who's doing what. Oh, I'm confused as to what are they really building?
Stormwater reuse
Yeah,
system.
what is that? I mean, what is it?
They'll capture rain like this.
Like off parking lots, rooftops,
On the
or?
roof, into ponds, and then they have it all hooked into the irrigation, which then will irrigate all their ball fields as shown in a figure with,
Okay.
that I've attached them to.
Is it just one pond that they're using? Or would be using?
Majority, I would guess on this one, looking at the potential irrigated area. The feasibility reports on these are pretty thick. I wasn't really involved with them as I was done with, actually was done with one of our water resource engineers and Rice Creek in the school district.
So what does a school provide?
Money.
Okay.
And the only reason we have to be involved is
Because they can't.
because they're not a watershed body or a municipality. Therefore, we have to carry the paperwork, but they're paying for all the costs, right? So it's kind of like private development.
They're paying for all, I thought it cost us 25.
Well, that's what you guys agreed upon to participate last year. If you say 20,000, then it's 20,000. If you wanted to go less, or more.
25 was for the high school project, correct?
yes. And then they've requested the same agreement for a different project for the middle school.
So we did this for the high school already?
Yep, they're in construction right now.
Cool.
But it's private construction, it's not.
Right. And that was the benefit, what we saw, the major benefit is, at the end of the day, we don't own or maintain the system.
Who does?
The school district does. And one thing I should mention, that the school district did actually go for the more expensive option with the high school to treat,
Shocking.
this is really technical for me, do the ultraviolet on the water. Because sometimes, and this is gonna provide as another test pit for Department of Health too, is some of these water reuse systems, there's precautions to follow if you're really taking water out of a parking lot and dumping it on the field and kids are out there playing now and you didn't do anything with that, there's some potential.
Legionnaire's disease? Is that what they're concerned about? Don't know.
Just bacteria in general, I would
Nitrogen,
think.
phosphorus, all that stuff that taking stormwater and then they're saying, okay, well, how healthy is that stormwater that's been sitting in a pond, say if you haven't irrigated for a while and you're getting
Yeah, that's,
stuff on it, so it's basically.
So they're doing that process, but then they're also, have things posted and they'll irrigate at particular times when the usage of kids isn't close. Just to be very cautious on that. Out in California, these rules are ridiculously strict. And our Minnesota Department of Health wanted to mimic and copy them right away. And that's when a lot of stuff has been going on in legislation and, they're working through some of the policy and stuff like that. But, granted to the school district, they took a more safer route, I guess, to be proactive on that. But obviously, one benefit here is, we got pretty good access to the residential neighborhood and potential future development north of Chestnut Creek that, this usable space, if it is really truly vegetated, it's gonna be more usable year round. Right now you go into some of their fields and they're pretty brown, or you can tell where they're dragging hoses around, so.
well, there's gotta be a savings as far as drawing water out of our wells for irrigation too, I would think.
well, we actually lose money.
Oh, do we?
Water production, but,
Really?
well, because we get, our revenue's based on water consumption, right? But what we've talked about in the past is if we could keep our water just like this, 12 months out of the year,
Mm-hmm.
and have to design your infrastructure to treat that, we'd be perfect, right? But in reality, you got 3 months.
Yeah.
And if we could get that irrigation out of that system, that's gonna help reduce that, you know.
Sure.
Not only projects like this, but it's a lot of education, talking to your neighbors and stuff like that too.
How much was the grant that they're gonna be getting on this, if we help them out?
Some of them are around 600,000.
So we're saving Forest Lake taxpayers about $600,000 by partnering with them?
It's coming from the clean water. Somebody's gonna get the money.
But, I mean, essentially, it's $600,000 residents aren't gonna be paying.
We wouldn't pay for it.
The city's paying for nothing. This is, like I said,
But if the city doesn't partner, the school doesn't get the grant, and if the school wanna do this, they have to do it on their own budget, which is funded by the taxpayers.
Yeah.
so.
Or they don't do it at all.
Or they don't do it, right? That would be the,
Right.
So this
and then we
grant's-
don't get the water, you don't get the water
This
savings.
grant has also been obtained by Comfort Lake with the Forest Hills Golf Course. And they're gonna be moving into construction here shortly too, so.
I think I'm in favor of anything that's for conservation of water, because it's just the right thing to do.
Right.
I do too.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, the other, I mean, we're losing sales of water, but it's costing us money, but I think the long run, the one thing it does do is we can document our efforts to conserve water and what we are actually conserving, because we are gonna need to build a new well.
Right.
And that's gonna be a big leverage on saying,
But that's-
we need a well.
that's
We
part of the
can't save
equation.
any more water than we are now.
And to Ryan's point too, I mean, it's, you make money selling water, but it's the strain on your system, those 3 months. If you can pull some of that strain off, I mean, it allows you to make water longer and not having your plants running 24 hours a day. I mean, and they're taking the maintenance, the full maintenance responsibility off of it, which is huge. I mean, one time of rehab and this is gonna be way more than $25,000, I can guarantee you.
So how are these systems augmented when you go through a drought like we just did for, what happens?
These things are massively deep, aren't they?
They're big and, you know, they have to meet all these parameters within the design to get the grants anyways. Obviously, if there's times that are, let's say we don't get any rain for a month, they either don't irrigate or they would then use potable water.
But besides those ponds that are used for irrigation, it's pretty hard to dry those up, aren't they?
In this area, yeah, I mean, this area is pretty wet.
Because they're significantly deep. I know the city of Blaine has one for all the soccer fields, and that thing's 80, 100 feet deep.
Well, look at the small one at the airport, that one got dry.
Yeah, that one never has water in it. It's amazing.
You know, just change the subject quick, Ryan, while I'm looking at this. Have they done anything with the middle school that improving the safety of the bus lane?
Remember they withdrew their applicant, and I've asked if anything else has been kinda ongoing, because, you know, we're gonna be fast approaching the next school year. Really got nothing back on exactly what they're doing. I gotta imagine that we're still shifting all the students, all the junior high students to this school, right? And then high school now becomes 9 through 12 next year. So I still wonder, I know they're changing their start times again, was one of the things that we were pretty adamant about, because they shrunk everything closer together, and, you know, you don't have to be an engineer, you could stand out there and watch all the interaction of driving between student drivers and parent drop-off, like, why not space those back out? High school kids are only get there 5 minutes before school anyway. So space those times back out like you did in previous years, so you don't have all that interaction, which should help a little bit there, but if, we're still looking for some answers, on the whole busing thing, because if we're really truly bringing as many buses as we talked about, they obviously gotta have something different.
Yeah.
But right now, there's no planned expansion of what you see, because they withdrew that application last I heard.
What was that application for to begin with? Just,
To expand that busing parking lot area on the north side of the Forest Lake Area Middle School.
Just to expand parking, but not, okay, yeah.
For the buses.
For the buses, that's right.
And it would go significantly to the east, where that, you can see the kind of hammerhead roundabout. That'd have been shifted way to the east where you see all the green space.
Okay. Is that something we should contact them with our concerns over?
I think a good starting point would be to talk to Donovan to see if he's had any further development on conversations.
Okay.
I haven't, so.
Ed?
The Fenway Park system out there, that irrigation is pulled from, is that just city water?
From the pond.
Is it pulled from the pond? So it's the same kind of situation?
That one's reused, that one's not pulling such a huge area, so if the ponds do go down, there's a separate well that'll fill that pond back up, so it doesn't pull potable water, it just pulls
Okay.
groundwater out of the ground, so it's not affecting our treated water, it's just pulling groundwater out.
But for the most part, it is reclaimed water.
Yeah,
Rainwater.
even with this year, I think we've turned it on twice, once straight, like in June when it got really hot and dry, and then just a little bit ago here to fill it back up, but otherwise it's, in most years, in 17 and 16, we didn't turn them on at all, so.
That council's lines.
All right, any other, discussion on that?
So one more question, maybe question of clarification. So the proposal for $25,000 is consistent with what we did for the high school? We're expected to use that full 25 for the high school? Is that,
That was our cash contribution to the project.
Okay,
and
okay.
No, nothing to exceed it, or, we said 25.
Okay.
And watersheds was based on percentage, and then the school was responsible for the remaining, other than the grant.
No, I was reading the part about, city staff contributions. Is that part of that 25,000?
that's an addition? Isn't it?
So, how much involvement have you had?
For the high school?
Yeah. So staff involvement has been our Tim Olson, but his time is all billed to the school's project. So the city sees the invoices, but it's a bill back agreement.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, yeah, it was 25,000,
Who's paying your engineering fees on it?
the school and
Okay.
watershed.
That's
Okay.
your, that's your deduct for your staff time.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that wasn't considering him staff.
I guess, going forward with it is fine, but maybe it should be contingent upon getting that, road easement taken care of before we contribute any more money to the school.
That's how I'd like to see it.
I've actually mentioned that exactly almost the way you worded it.
I just hate to hold them hostage, but I mean, there's something that needs to be done, there's no question about
Well,
that.
they've had it for 2 years now,
Yeah.
and haven't done anything with it,
So,
and
we-
hoping we'd forget
But
about it.
because, you know, this whole thing is a good idea, it certainly is, it's water conservation, and there's certainly a benefit to us about this whole thing, or a benefit to the city of Forest Lake, and so,
I think,
I think that this road thing is a workable situation, I really do.
it's been 2 years, you said, now?
A good 2 years, hasn't it?
Yeah, I believe, I think it was the end of 17 or 16, I can't remember. I think it's been a while.
I
since
mean,
I've had it.
it's a motivational
Way too
factor.
long for just a lawyer reviewing some things.
It's a motivational factor better than, the toll road option.
I,
All right.
yeah, I hate to, I echo Sam's comments a bit, and I hate to put a good project behind a sticky project. I mean, yes, the one needs to be resolved, and let's keep focus on that, but
And I think it's coming to a head, I really do.
No. Ed?
I think they should, the individual projects stand on their own merit, but as far as the road is concerned, I think the city needs, if no resolution comes soon, the city needs to put the hammer down. It's our road, then, if they're gonna say it's our road, then we can do what we please with our road. If it comes to that. 'Cause I mean, 2 years is a long time.
potential massive student impact, right? Like, I don't know what you mean by put the hammer down, but it concerns me a bit. But
I just expect them to live up to what they said they were going to do.
I mean.
And fair, yep,
You know, in
yep.
good faith, we did everything we were
Fair.
supposed to do.
There.
And
Do you have a suggestion to put the pressure on? I mean,
I mean, to me,
we can't be taken advantage of repeatedly.
but when the road was, when the project was just completed, there's no need for maintenance, so it's obviously wasn't pressing to either one of us. But as we go forward, it's going to become pressing, of course.
I guess I would, rather than me saying what my solution would be, I would rather have the conversation on, let's keep it moving along, and what is this, if we're at a stalemate, what are some possible solutions? And we offer some as a body, and
But-
school offers some as a body.
I don't think holding them hostage to this project should be one of them.
I agree.
Right.
And just in reference, I don't think we're at a stalemate with it. I think we're just probably we're working at the speed of attorneys right now, which always isn't the fastest speed. But the maintenance agreement, I think we'll get that reviewed, get that back over to them, let them have a chance to review it and get it back. And, you know, I think stalemates are probably still a ways off. I still see a lot of movement between both sides on this one. So I think we can come to resolution before having to kind of take those next steps, and, you know, which we would have to take if we hit stalemate, but we're not there yet.
All right.
They should have hired Bridget.
Get it done. So let's go into budget feedback.
Members of council, just a reminder, we do have a budget workshop on Wednesday. The reason why this was included was just so if you have any kind of last takeaways that I can take back to Hannah, just to give a quick review or add into the budget before we go into Wednesday, just so we can have the most current number set. We do have, Hannah just got today the market capacity, kind of the preliminaries from Washington County, so we could potentially look at what the tax impact is going to be on the proposed budget. Again, they're all preliminary numbers at this point, nothing's final, but she will have a calculator that we will be able to bring to the meeting on Wednesday. But right now, I'm just kind of looking for, you know, if there's anything that, if you ever had a chance to review what's in there, anything that we missed, anything you want added, any changes, just kind of last minute stuff that we can go take back to make Wednesday's workshop a little bit more productive. This actually is Hannah's memo, so she has more of the detail in terms of what's in here, but I did tell her I would take back any final comment or any final additions. So she would have time tomorrow and Wednesday just to kind of get those prepared for Wednesday night, so we can kind of, again, come out of the gate running on this one.
A couple of questions. One, the equipment for the fire department. Looks like we are facing some serious shortfalls there. Do we have a consensus of where we're going as far as, are we replacing one engine, two engines, three engines?
Well, we gotta replace the tender, for sure.
Yep.
One engine, I feel definitely, you know, if we can extend the life of the other engine so that we space those out for future replacements, is what I would like to see, a couple of years.
'Cause that's gonna be a big dollar item, you know, like.
And I think if you,
Huge, and then, you know, every X amount of years after that. I think the fire department, years back made a big mistake with, you know, how long
To keep
they
equipment.
projected to keep equipment. I don't see a town this size having 30 and 40-year-old fire equipment. I think that is, not good at all. So we, you know, we need to have them take a look at that capital improvement plan of theirs and get more in with reality of the actual service life of the vehicles and not having to send them in to get rehabbed to extend a few years and, you know, patchwork in between. I think our firefighters need to have reliable, modern equipment on it.
Yeah, the one's not even roadworthy as far as I'm concerned. You know,
Well, it
open
won't,
frame and stuff.
it won't be.
Oh, my goodness. Terrible.
And, you know, I've had a talk with Al because, you know, the duties of the fire department are changing. And it's more rescue than fire. And, you know, we need to recognize the equipment we need should be
Well,
more
that's what
rescue
I was
than
leading up
fire.
to, are we purchasing,
The right?
The right
instead of
equipment.
just replacing three engines for three engines, maybe we only need two engines, but we might need more rescue type equipment, you know?
Yeah, and that conversation really has to come along with Al too. I mean, he's gonna be the expert
Right.
in that situation.
But it's something we should have
Oh, I-
before the budget.
Oh, I'm not arguing that, Ed, at all.
Well, the need, you know, the need for water
haul into a fire. Hopefully we don't have any fires, but the need to haul that fire, the water there. We have 2 stations. We need to have an engine at both of them.
Right?
So,
But like Al had mentioned, maybe a wellhead on the western portion of the city
yep, that would reduce time for filling.
might be a better,
Still gotta have that tender there.
huh?
Still gotta have that.
Yeah, I
tender to
know,
make
but it
the-
can fill faster.
Correct.
Whereas the other way, you could have 2 tenders and still run out of water.
I think part of the talk is in the future too, is like the command vehicle. It's a big, expensive rig, and if you're going out to a rescue, you just don't need that big a command vehicle for it. You need something with, rescue equipment in it, it could be replaced with a lot less expensive, say 1 ton or smaller vehicle that, would be out there. In case there is an accident, somebody rear ends it, something like that happens to it. You don't have a $500,000 vehicle out there, but it's a $100,000 vehicle instead.
Well, the other thing I'd like Al to explore is, and I think you're the one that mentioned it, was, is there any, it came up in our interviews with quite a few of the candidates on joint power agreements, and because fire equipment's so expensive, and small communities just can't carry that load, maybe there's some opportunity with Scandia to share a tender or
I
something
definitely
like
think
that.
I think there's.
So that, it's not called out every day, but if the fire happens to be in Forest Lake, it comes this way. If it happens to be in Scandia, it's going that way. Like,
I think there's.
kind of what we're doing with Columbus right now.
Right. There's definitely, I think, an opportunity to explore that. I think it's a great benefit, to get all the communities working together. Maybe even, do some joint training and, potentially a shared station, something out there would be something Al talked about too, so. The future of the fire department is evolving. I think it has to, just with, the demands of where our city and, the outlying areas are going with it anyway, to be able to respond to, those needs. And, rescue is becoming more and more. Now, I was going to kind of expand on that too as we get into the budget here. The police department has a community service officer positions, in there, and I think that, when I first thought about it, it's a good idea. I thought they should have one for a while, but, looking at the needs of a community service officer, and are we doing the right thing placing it within a police department? Or would it be better as a, firefighter slash something? I mean, we're gonna use them for code enforcement in the building department, but what needs really, the animal control, I think we can still contract for a lot of that. But rather than getting, a young kid that's maybe going to school, but, the potential of, somebody that's retired already, but, still has, quite a few years, hopefully, of service that, maybe would like to work in a position like that. But having a day, adding one more person, daytime response, firefighting, might be a lot more benefit to the city and still have that code enforcement and other things in that position, rather than creating that position in, police department where, are they stepping on toes of another response or doing things like that, so.
And part of the reason why it was code enforcement got put in the CSO position was there's also a need on the front end on the admin side of the police department for some backfill up there. So we kind of figure, when we looked at it, if we did a CSO, they would be doing code enforcement plus some admin work in the front as well, so they could kind of help bolster what we have for support staff up front. So I think that's the reason why it got placed in the police department. Because code enforcement obviously has, it's cyclical, it's busier in the summertime, it's busier in the spring when the snow goes away. It's a little bit quieter in the wintertime. However, we are seeing those needs for when code enforcement kind of dips down, they could then backfill on the admin side for the police department help on the front end, because they are very short-staffed in the front end. There is a definite need for additional staffing in the front end of the police department. And this was kind of a way to give them some front-end support, and as well as it also came out of the CPSM study. There was a recommendation for a community service officer kind of blended. We haven't really drilled down to, you know, exactly what all the CSO would be doing, but there was the discussion at first of code enforcement and then some front-end office work as well, just to kind of, again, help out those admin assistants in the front of the police department.
But then again, a CSO would be kind of expensive for doing just administrative duties here, right?
I mean, again, it's gonna depend on, you know, where they're at. I mean, I guess we need to go back and define the roles a little bit more. We just kind of put it in there as an option, just to kind of get some, you know, as a starting point, you know, not wanting to do so if this goes through, if this is approved in part of this budget, then we'd go back and start doing that next level work to see what the hourly rate would be. We're confident the number that's in there, we would not exceed that number that's in there, but we have to go back through and say, what's the pay rate? Where would it fit in the organization? I mean, that work has not been done. We've started to sample other cities to see what they're doing. So have started to collect the job descriptions. We have not really tailored them down to what the city, you know, to exactly what we're looking for. It was just basically, we're looking at approximately this much money for a CSO, put in the budget. If it gets through, then we'll start going down to that next level of work, you know, so making sure that we're spending our time wisely, you know, and doing the work that is council directed.
Now, community service officers are more of an entry-level pay grade, so it's a lot cheaper than an officer. Are they getting benefits?
Yep.
It's full-time.
That would be envisioned, yeah. I mean, that's the
They're
envision.
working full-time.
Yep.
What I researched online, I think it's pretty typical for them to be $25 an hour to start. And I think it'd be money well spent to develop a program where our future officers come from.
It's a nice future program.
And, you know, let's face it, to use a full-time officer for events like the 4th of July parade, directing traffic, those are things that you don't need a full-time officer for. Or I shouldn't say a full-time officer, but a police officer. And that would free them up to do more policing.
Yeah, certainly.
Anyways, I
And-
think
and
it's
just-
an opportunity that we should look at anyway.
I think just doing like community outreach is something, you know, I mean.
I mean, if you go to Market Fest, you'll always see 2 or 3 resource officers walking around. They're young people that are in law enforcement, studying law enforcement. And, you know, they're doing, a lot of it is just policing the crowd, more informational, people asking them questions, where's this, where's that, directing
Visibility,
traffic.
Right.
Being present.
In fact, one of our officers our regular officers now started in that program. So, I would not be adverse to putting some money into a program like that.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's well worth some discussion, but really kind of drilling down a little more details of what's expected of them. The animal control function of it, I guess, I don't know if that really is where I'd like to, you know, see that part of it going anyway.
I think that was just an option that was kind of brought forward. I mean, I don't think it'd be more like if there's a loose dog and before they can contract law. I mean, I think this kind of, there's certain tasks that they'd be able to do that an officer is currently doing, so it could kind of
Not
help.
out there scooping dead skunks out of the road.
No,
and stuff
no,
like
not like that. No, I mean, and again, I think the vision is, you know, at this point, it was a way to, you know, kind of help us do, you know, some of the code enforcement work that we're doing as well as give some front-end assistance as well, because again, that's a very significant need on the police department, and this is kind of a way to kind of, you know, address both needs.
Sure. Frees up your officers to do what they do best better.
Agree.
Any other, so how do we want to just go general fund, or just, I guess I'd just be open to,
Well,
open the floor for questions.
Well, one of the questions I have on the budget is, previously, we've had councils that have gone through line by line every item on the budget. What, I guess, what's this council's wish to how to approach it?
Well, I mean, this is the first peek at it
I
before
don't mean the
Wednesday.
next meeting, but
Yeah.
I'm just, in general, how are we going to approach the budget?
My personal, I kind of look at it as, you know, where are the significant changes?
Yeah.
because, you know, if there's not really a, 20% increase, a 10% increase on anything, it seems to be going along fine, and, we've got certain expectations. But, this year's budget, last year's too, I mean, we see some, 100% here, 100% there, but they're not really changes. It's, funds moving from one place to another. Part of it is the pay-as-you-go. The bigger picture is, we've got a fairly modest increase, but it's still an increase. And I gotta find the right page, it's up there anyway, but is it about $400,000 increase, Dan? You add everything together?
2%
Two 211, the proposed overall levy is 211, 211,000, 2.11%.
Yeah, so a little over $200 and some thousand increase. And on a $10 million budget, your CPI right now is almost 2%, correct?
Yeah,
So
right around
basically, we're
Right on schedule.
Pretty
right on
flat.
schedule
Yep.
anyway.
Yeah, answer your question, Ed. I think start with the year-over-year comparisons, talk about the big known things that are known. Then I think it's on each of us to kind of look at that and like think about what you want to see for 2019. And is it included in the list? And let's make sure we've got kind of all of everything on the table, and then kind of
But will we also be,
granular from there.
I mean, will the department heads be bringing their wish list?
I think this reflects
Yeah.
the department
Or is this
head's wish-
reflect-
So this, what we have here, this basically is kind of, we went back, department heads actually kind of already integrated what we're looking at.
That's in here?
Yeah, I guess the intent, I mean, tonight, I mean, getting into the actual line items really wasn't the intent here tonight, because I don't have all the department heads here to kind of explain why a line item shifted or moved. This is more, as you look at it, is there anything that we missed that we, had been a desire to have included in there? Do you want something, costed out of the budget? I guess that's kind of like, it was a last minute kind of buttoned up before Hannah comes in and does the presentation, because again, she's gonna be able to speak to a lot more detail into some of what are the drivers, and then I'm going to be. But again, just wanted to look for, kind of that last level of feedback. So Wednesday's meeting, we're able to, again, like I said, get out of the gates and just kind of dive right into those numbers and not kind of say, oh, I forgot, what X, Y, or Z.
My other question is, with the new city administrator coming on board, when he comes on board, I would like him to have a bite at the budget, if he can get here soon enough.
Challenge will be the timing of the levy, so we need to, what's the levy date for the preliminary levy?
So the preliminary levy date is actually due by the end of September. So in essence, the way you could look at this, we're just setting the high point. So we can't go, so once that levy number is set, so I mean, I guess at this point, if there's anything that you want to potentially even have a discussion about or leave some room in there, there's nothing wrong in setting that number high. You can always whittle it down before December, before it's adjusted. So conceivably, if you set the number up, a little bit higher than maybe it will end up, is that you can always, like I said, once the new administrator starts, they could go back through and whittle that number down. It's just, you can't increase it. Once it's set, you can't go any higher than that. So, I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at right now, is just setting that initial number, but it has to be set right now, the goal would be to set it for the first meeting in September, and if we need to move it back to the end of September, we can do that as well. But there is still some movement in the individual line items you can shift, you can move around, but, you can't go any higher than what we set in September.
So, one thing I was disappointed when I looked at this at the finance committee, and we had talked about it, is setting up a fund for changing roads from, going from from gravel to asphalt roads. We had actually committed, I thought, $200,000. And between the time we said we'd do that now, that vaporized. And so that part of it, I'd still like to look at. Ryan has been pushing us a little bit on, and thank you for doing that, Ryan, bringing it to our attention, but just expanding some infrastructure needs, water and sewer, pre-development expansion to spur that along, get some areas done that are prime for that. And we don't have that
investment, that vision in this budget.
So just to speak to that point and a point of clarity, we did go back after the finance committee meeting and we actually do have, it's on page 29 of the packet. So Hannah created out three scenarios, the gravel road paving levy scenarios where, so that $200,000 that was allocated is still, there's still a fund that has $200,000 that's kind of there.
That
There
is
just
still
wasn't a
there.
dedicated funding source for it. So basically at this point, you'll just stay at 200,000. There's nothing that's going to increase it. So what Hannah did was he actually looked at it and says, what happens if you do scenario one where you add $100,000 annually to the budget? What does that do to the levy? You know, then again, ran it on scenario two with adding 250, and then scenario three was 500. So I mean, that's kind of what she's looking at. And she hadn't fully ran all the numbers. She, again, will incorporate that into the calculator, but there's some options where you say, you know, we want to put $100,000 into that fund annually. This is what it'll do to the levy request. So we did go back, we just didn't incorporate it in operations, because what we tried to do with basically the operations budget was to leave that as just strictly operations. So again, we're not trying to do, capital equipment purchases are now in its own category. This, you know, gravel road paving levy would be in its own category. Basically, we're looking at operations. And one of the reasons why we separated all the rest of the stuff out is that when you look year over year on operations, you can actually see it should be more flatline. In the past, when we move a big capital equipment purchase in, so we move a $500,000 fire truck in, and we're gonna have a spike in that year's budget, which is okay. However, when you look back at it 3 years down the road, you're gonna go back and say, and the first thing you're gonna say is, why did the levy in this year go up, or why was the budgeted amount significantly higher? All that's gonna be in the capital equipment fund, so that's gonna kind of normalize your year-over-year operations budget, which makes budgeting just long-term a little bit easier, a lot more transparent as well.
On Ben's comment about expanding utilities maybe, I don't know if it's the right place for this suggestion or thought. Doesn't
Sorry, I wasn't, we were chatting, well,
expanding utilities, enhancing development options? There's a water line that runs down Hornsby. Does Wyoming own that, I believe?
Columbus.
Columbus? They even utilize that? Would we
you
be,
run it all winter long to keep it.
They will be now.
would we be interested in purchasing that, connecting to it, and using that to expand development down that way? I mean, that's starting to encroach down where we've had some proposals.
I don't think they have
I
the
think that's
capacity in
state
their
line.
water
We would
system to do
suck
anything.
them dry. But
No, I wouldn't say
at
hook
some
into
point
them.
to set up for an interconnect, you see where the parkway is starting to hit that intersection?
Yep.
Where we would have an interconnect there at some day to emergency purposes. But they've also inquired with us, and Mayor Winnick's been in some of those meetings about the city of Forest Lake supplying them water because they don't have the capacity to supply us.
I wasn't thinking about, I mean, it looks like it's been an idle line. I don't think any of those businesses are even tied in, right?
The businesses that are along that frontage road in next to 60 or 35 are tied into their public infrastructure. But they've also expanded their infrastructure all the way down to the end, and it's a dead end line. Yeah, Hornsby, then it turns into Elmcrest, right?
Yep.
But that's where we are projecting our utilities will someday meet, and we'll have an interconnect somewhere in that point. We've talked about it. And then obviously someday we want to interconnect with Hugo, or have talked about it.
I was thinking along the lines of running a water line to meet that, purchase the line from them if they're not using it, if it's a dead end line for them, and that would give us water supplied down there for development purposes.
But it's tied all back to their infrastructure.
It's in their loop.
Is it looped for them?
That's a dead end, but it goes all the way up to 97 too, and then crosses the freeway through Casing,
Okay.
and then serves the casino area and all that.
And if they develop that corner where they have the signs now, they'll be using that.
Okay.
But the one thing Dave and I were chatting over here about is, we've continually had the conversations about your user rates and your fees that you collect within your sewer and your water. You know, when we have these subdivisions and developments, we collect an area charge oftentimes, which is supposed to go to trunk extension lines, but it's really been sitting in the pot supplementing some of the user rates. Whether it's completely segregated or we slowly segregate that, but at some point in the future, your development's gonna be done, you won't be collecting any new area charges, and then you'll just be stuck with your user rates that you should have been running your operations with, right? But, you know, I bring that up because the last time we did use those funds to do a sewer extension was in 2002. And then in 2004, they finished it to get to Hawthorne Heights. And then in 2006, that's when that development came. So there are examples like that within the city, that when the city used those funds the way they're being collected for, it spurred development within a year or two later. There's certainly some spots, pretty strategic spots, that you could extend some sewer and water in open fields, or even directionally drill down a road with water main and disturb barely anything, but set up that next development. You know, big hiccup that we're running into the whole Chestnut Creek area, right? We need to connect the sewer from that area to Hawthorne Heights. You got two options. Do you wanna come on the north side or the east side? As soon as you do that, you, one, you eliminate a lift station, and two, you blowing up that whole corridor up to 97 and Harrow and down to 202nd or County Road 50 for development, because your sewer capacity's there now. But until we make that connection between Hawthorne Heights and the Chestnut Creek area, you are at capacity.
That also helps out with the fire issue too, in that end of town, right?
Yeah, that's got to, yeah.
Correct. So is that something we might wanna consider investing in?
Well, yeah, I would definitely think we'd wanna look at it right away, but the other, you know, issue would be is getting the landowners to,
That one would be
sign
going
on.
across private property.
I wouldn't think they would be opposed to it if it doesn't, incur them charges at the moment anyway, and it's gonna be the same charge when whoever goes
But if you
to
do sewer,
develop it.
aren't they forced to hook up then?
Well, there's no houses there to hook up to though, but, yeah.
Oh,
You know, another thought, does EDA have discussion on the property the city owns, up the,
Off the
Fairport?
headwaters?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep, we've been having some discussions there. Our next step will be looking for a Washington County, grant, pre-development type grant to, come up with some concepts, some possibilities in there.
is there something again that, to try to stimulate some growth in that area, we should think about moving the levy along to have a cushion so we could move on that versus it being a 5-10 year plan, we can speed that process up.
I think that's a really prime piece of property, and we need to wait for the right projects to come there. I don't think we need to try and speed that one along. We need to promote it with the right people like Minnesota D, MinCar, things like that, that, you know, are looking for those, bigger sites. I think our infrastructure is close enough now where, you know, that build-out would be, you know, part of construction. I don't think we need to really do a lot of pre-planning there, other than where potentially we could have a new public works or new tower and treatment facility. And that probably, Ryan, you could speak to that a little bit more, but we're kind of limited to that with the location of that main water main. Isn't
the
that?
city-owned parcel?
Yeah.
So we got water stubs in there, but ideally, we have a 16-inch main that we would like to continue southward. So if somehow we could mirror that with the developments, that would be ideal. Then eventually it gets looped back, there will be 12-inch line that could be further brought south as well, so. You know, one thing that we talked about in the EDA is, I thought I heard that guy that presented that Project Pepper has not made a decision, and maybe something we could do is reach out back to that project, because at the time they were looking at it, we didn't have Headwaters Parkway built. So we were talking about what, $2 million price tag before you even looked at doing development. Now that's been taken care of, and utilities even been brought a little closer. But I do think that area is going to, if you allow it to develop here sometime in the future because of the completion of the work and then just stuff that's in the area that you see.
And I think two things too, part of the water rate study, we also look at the area charges as well. Will be included in that water rate study that we're bringing forward on Monday, or at next Monday's meeting. So that way, we can look at, as we get along down the road, as these developments come on board, we can have enough money in the access charges to do those trunk extensions moving forward. So that's gonna be part of the water rate study. Also, with this gravel road, paving levy, you could make that, relabel that, whatever you wanted to call it, infrastructure improvement account or whatever, and then fund that, so when you have these infrastructure improvement projects come forward, they come out of this particular fund, so I mean, this could be kind of the catch-all for infrastructure improvements, going forward, but again, we do have some different models in there to show, since that there was some investment made in that fund of the 200,000, just to kind of keep a funding source behind it, because right now, one project will eat up that 200,000, there's nothing else that can be done, so we would need to find a source of funding for it to kind of make that sustainable long-term.
I think we need to think about that, discuss it more. Probably makes more sense to ramp that up, start off a little bit smaller and add to it. Every year ramp it up a little bit more, till we hit a cap. We should probably look at setting a cap on it.
Target balance.
Do that. The radios, if we were gonna go for that, for the water meters, that would come out of the water fund, or not the general fund, correct?
I think the water fund's correct. And I think a lot of what we're talking about here with Ryan too, with the SAC and WAC charges will come in October when we switch to utility funds, the enterprise funds, the sewer and water funds. You can look at improving infrastructure, but to Ryan's point, the meters and all that, you're more into enterprise and how we're gonna fund that going forward as well.
Sure.
Does the city ever put a fee on utility bills that just says water meter fee or fund? I've seen that in multiple cities. Anywhere from a town of 5,000 people to 90,000, when they're doing these replacements.
Some cities even charge residents for the meters. I'm not saying that's right, because we reserve access to them, and we demand they're in operating condition, but I'm not opposed to a fee, because I know other municipalities make the residents buy them, have to keep them in working condition. If it breaks, city fixes it, bills them for the repair or for the replacement.
I just wanna bring it up because I see all these, I know when other communities are doing infrastructure improvements in them, because I can just look at a utility bill, they're flat out water meter fee. So instead of, raising the rates, they'll just do that for short term, and then it falls off when it's paid for or whatever, instead of bonding to. But that's just something to think about. You can ask those questions with the group that'll be doing the water rate study, so. Just to see what other cities are doing too.
Sounds good.
So, anything else that you want me to bring? Just one last thing on this, on the capital equipment replacement fund. We do have, to Councilmember Agnews' question about the engine replacements on fire, they are incorporated, both the tender and the engine for 19. So we do have both of those in the fund. Just in general, as you look forward, if you look at, it's on the last page, there's a separate worksheet. The fund right now, we basically did the projections through 2023, kind of figuring that once we get through the next 5 years, we'll then project back out CIP long-term so we can get what the funding revenue is. Because again, we're a little bit behind the 8 ball going to the pay-as-you-go. But if we basically just funded the way it's been funded right now, as presented in this budget, in 2020, we actually will hit a deficit in the CIP fund, because we have a couple of bigger expenses in 20 and 21. We still run a smaller deficit in 22, and it goes back again in 2023. I guess just bringing that to your attention, just so as we look for capital equipment funding, we're close to pay-as-you-go right now. We're close to the next 3 years, but we kind of hit a spot after we get through that where all of a sudden we're going to be back into not being able to meet the capital needs. One of the suggestions I asked Hannah about was, we're looking at getting through August at this point, we're projecting another surplus in budget for this year. We don't know what that number is going to be yet, but just kind of early indicators are showing that we're going to have another surplus this year. So I asked her, I said, just kind of get a ballpark estimate. I said, again, these numbers could change by the time we do year end. But if that surplus was applied and did we kind of similar to what we did last year, was put into the capital equipment fund, there may be enough there that'll actually make this cash positive throughout the next, to 2023. We wouldn't have to kind of worry about making adjustments in purchases, because the caution that we have is that if we defer a purchase in 2020 to make the numbers work, we're just basically kicking that can down the road, because that equipment need isn't going to necessarily go away. But just, and Hannah will go into a little more detail on that, but I just wanted you to be aware of that just before Wednesday, that we are, through those bigger purchases that we have the next 2 years, we are able to fund those out of a current CIP without having to do anything, any additional funding, but we do have that deficit there that's kind of on the short-term horizon.
All right, question I had, and I guess you kind of alluded to it, but now that we have the other, was it a tender? I always get those confused. From the tender with, and it takes almost 6 months from conception to get a fire truck made. Can we make that purchase so it falls in next year's budget?
That is the intent. I mean, we did advance it, so we have tender one replacement. We are budgeted. That's in the CIP budget for 19 is a tender one at 258, 400. I mean, that's again, the ballpark estimate, what Al, or Chief Newman predicted the cost of that tender would be. So we do have that advance into the 2019 CIP plan that we're presenting on Wednesday.
But it's in 2019?
Yeah, that wasn't originally, we did not originally anticipate that need for that piece of equipment, but we did budget for it, knowing that, even though we didn't plan for that need in 19, it's here, and we had to make the adjustment to it. So we did include it in next year's budget, or next year's CIP, excuse me.
But my question is, could it go to 20? Because it's gonna take you a half a year to get the thing from conception to actually being made.
Yeah, I mean, it could potentially go to 20. I think what it does do, though, I mean, we're not changing the numbers over the course of the 5 years. We're still looking at the same amount of revenue, same amount of expenses. We're just shifting what years that's happened. So I think at the end of the day, if we don't change our funding strategy for capital equipment needs, we are going to be running into a deficit on that. One thing that we did do this year, we had some debt fall off. So rather than just, reduce that, we did just put all that back into CIP, what we're contributing is what's presented in the budget, so that we have a pretty sizable capital equipment, or transfer in the capital equipment fund, that's what's helping us keep cash positive, so even if that tender truck is deferred to 20 or 21 even, it still doesn't necessarily change what the fund balance would be in
But
2020.
it pushes $500,000 from one budget to the next, right?
It doesn't, and I guess, you would potentially change it a little bit because we would have interest accruing on the $500,000 a little bit longer, but I think substantially, you still have this amount of revenue, this amount of expenses, and it's just kind of,
Right.
when you, and I would actually argue the fact that if you make the purchase early, that piece of equipment is needed, so you're probably better off advancing that purchase up rather than deferring it out a couple more years.
It's better than paying interest on the money, that's for sure.
Anybody else have any questions or concerns?
I had just a little nit item that I wanted to mention that we haven't talked about at all, just see if there's any appetite for it. So the funding for lake water quality improvements have really dried up for the lake associations. And it jumped to my mind when I was going through the line items, and, we've got a line item for the weed cutter. Do we have any appetite as a city to supplement that or to look at that? I know it's been a need for both Forest Lake and
We
Clear
kicked it
Lake.
up this year, right?
Correct, so.
By $6,000?
So I went through, so Clear Lake came in early and they requested 7,000
Right.
for the erosion control that got
We approved.
approved. So that bill came in, I just have that on my desk right now, which will get submitted. We used to get billed, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the watershed, Comfort Lake, Forest Lake they would contribute to the erosion control on Forest Lake. I believe it was up to $20,000, and we would so instead of us just paying the Lake Association to make the pit, we would just basically square up with Comfort Lake, Clear Lake Watershed District at the end of the year. This year, in order for them to provide fairness to all the lakes within the district, they said, we're not gonna do aquatic weed control anymore, because we don't offer it to all the other lakes within the district. So they're just reducing the amount that they bill us by that, I believe it was right around $20,000 is what they would spend on weed control. So then, working with the Forest Lake Association, we did still end up contributing towards their erosion control this year. We became the intermediate, we just paid that. I believe it was, I wanna say 7,000, because they didn't treat as much as they thought they were gonna treat. So we still contributed to both associations, and actually this year was a pretty equitable contribution to both associations.
And is that planned to continue into 19?
Yeah, I didn't see that, I don't think that line item changed in 19's budget.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I think the weed harvesting itself is a fairly limited program.
It is.
So, but yeah, weed control in general is,
So yeah, inside the weed harvesting is where that chunk of money is where we pay out, Comfort Lake, Forest Lake, and the Lake Association is kind of just tied into weed harvesting, but that's where we pay that dollar amount.
It's in that line item. Okay.
Yeah, for some reason, that's how it went in there, but that's where that chunk, I think it's contractor payments or professional services or whatever that $50,000 is, that's what that line item is for, is just those payments to the watersheds and lake associations.
Okay. Thank you.
all right. Anything else tonight, or we'll see you again in a couple of days?
Oh, so sorry. Not to make this longer. Quick update on where we are with SRC. No, wasn't on the agenda. Are we planning on bringing it to?
Yes. In that, the reason why it wasn't on the agenda, I couldn't get, with Bridget having kind of being, working on some other projects last week, she just couldn't get the amendment that we would need to make to the contract drafted. So we do have a plan in place to draft, and what's gonna get brought back is basically just their request at $495, is the starting point, in the amendment. If there's any desire to change that amount, we can change that. But the thought would be, when I talked to Bridget about it, was basically, we're looking at kind of making it, memorializing it, it's a one-time, just so that language is clear that this is a one-time, adjustment based on, and here's kind of where the thought process was behind the adjustment on that, and then, presenting that as part of next Monday's meeting. We just didn't have time to get it all drafted and kind of hammered out, and you don't want me writing a legally binding contract, because I just don't have.
Bridget's been a little bit on the busy side.
Yeah, and I did talk to her, so that is something that we are gonna be bringing forward again, on Monday's meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
But that's a straight one-time 495,
That's what she's recommending.
no extension, right?
Correct, that's what that would be, and then if there's a discussion point for an extension, because I know there was a little bit of time, they wanted that rate adjustment brought forward relatively quickly. So that, it was easier to kind of take that trip path and then talk about doing an extension, because there's still some time. There's still 11 months within the contract. Also, just taking a look back, I know Councilmember Backus had requested the tipping fees, for the historical tipping fees. I did finally locate those this afternoon, so I'm starting to go back through and take a look at where tipping fees were when that contract was signed and what the adjustments were. And there was, initially, there was a pretty sizable increase back in 18. I think it went up like $7 a ton. But I'm also trying to average that out to, what does the average individual resident in Forest Lake generate? Now, granted, I'm kind of taking a shot in the dark on this, using some old total tonnage numbers versus what the total number of customers were that they've reported back to Washington County. So I'm using data that was within the contract. Now, this could, again, I'll present this on Monday, but it's not perfect analysis, but at least gives you a ballpark. Is that 495 a reasonable number based on the tipping fee increase? So,
Yeah, the thing of it is, it's not just tipping fees, though. There was the
Recycle.
The
Right.
recycle that all of a sudden it went like this.
yep.
Well, and Marge brought in to me, because she thought we were gonna be on the agenda tonight, but I told her it was gonna be, I'm sorry about that, but, the recycling fees, again, for last month doubled. So it went
Yeah.
from her cost of 6,000 something to over $12,000.
Right,
Hopefully
yes.
we're kinda at the peak of that, but,
I think the tipping fees are only the tip of the iceberg, really.
Right.
perfect storm, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm just incorporating them in there, and again, just kind of doing the back of the napkin math, because I mean, honestly, it's not my industry. I don't work in, this, so I don't know if $1.89 is in line or not in line. I'm just trying to provide a little bit of context in terms of some of the data that we have to say, is this a reasonable, increase? And also trying to be cognizant of the fact too, that they've paid increased tipping fees since Jan 1 of 17, and trying to figure out if there've been, because they did request that impact back then, and trying to see, kind of normalizing up as best I can with the data.
Along with the tipping fees, what you have there, the cost, she said she used to get paid to recycle, now she has to pay to get rid of the recycling. Those kinds of numbers I'd like to see when we do talk about it. Things like fuel prices and, wages are kind of objective. You should have insight on those things on a 5-year contract, but,
Boy, that recycling fee, that
That's-
really got
that's
thrown, that was,
big.
that's just within the last 6 months to a year.
Oh,
And
That in
Yeah.
itself is.
yeah, I just wanna
Well,
see
the worst part
those,
is their mandate, not only to get charged the
Right.
exorbitant fee, but then they mandate you to recycle
yeah.
when they're taking it to the burner.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're going through all this work to separate, using 2 trucks to haul it down there, only for them to combine 80% of it again and burn it. I mean, it's just
no
crazy.
sense.
It's
And I
a-
think to be clear on the recycling portion of it, that's gonna be a lot harder to analyze just because I don't have the market data. You know, I don't know what they're pulling in. I mean, the tipping fees is pretty easy. I mean, here's your tonnage that you brought in 15, here's what we think each house we're gonna produce, rough customers. I can get a ballpark there. The commodities market, though, trying to backtrack all that data would be a 3-month project with some pretty extensive.
No, I don't know
research.
how much time really to spend on it because I
wouldn't
think it's a
spend-
modest increase.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I'm just kind of seeing is it, where are we, you know, just where it is, just so again, so that due diligence is done, just
I
to
mean,
see.
it doesn't put us at the top of the heap as far as, you know, monthly charges for our citizens anyway. It puts us down there in the middle. And, I think our options are, you know,
Limited.
this is the
Yeah.
best moving forward because if we start to go out for an RFP, anything else, I think those rates are gonna come in significantly higher than what Marge is asking for to keep this contract going.
That's what I was gonna say about it, because the next time that you go through the bidding process, you're gonna find out if you made a mistake or not, for sure.
I just wanna have as much data about actual expenses we can that aren't just, you know, hearsay. I wanna have the numbers, so we can make a informed decision on it.
Sure.
I would say looking at it, the tipping fees will be pretty locked down, recycling, you know, it will be more, you know, I'm taking their word on the recycling increase, because you did separate them out in her request, so that's what I'm analyzing on.
I think she's presenting invoices though, so.
That'd be adequate, I just
Yeah,
wanted to
it's
see.
like- yeah, and I can put
That'd be
those
an
in.
accurate number, I mean.
And I can get those in, I just don't, I don't have time to go through and do all that per customer, I can do that for tonnage though, for tipping fees.
Dan, will you have sufficient time to, once Bridget gets the revised contract, to
Yeah,
walk
like, see what
Marge
it
through
was
that?
a
Is the
year
plan that you and Marge are on the same page
Correct.
as we walk
You know,
into council
copies
as
of
much as
invoices
possible?
from
What
last
I'm
year.
trying to get
Just so
away
we can
from is,
Quantify it.
we have a history on
That'd
this
be
one of
great.
having lots of moving pieces during discussion, and because it's a fairly sizable rate increase, I'd like us to just have that locked down so public can see it, and so that we're not having a lot of moving pieces on Monday's conversation. Does my question make sense, or my concern
No, and I
make
think
sense?
my goal was to get the, you know, at least the tipping fee analysis done and get that released out, because I told Marge, I said, I'm not gonna present anything in here that I would not have yet let her have a first
Perfect.
chance to review on it, because, again, this is not my industry, this is not, these numbers aren't, you know, readily available, you kind of are making a little bit of interpretation on it, but,
And, I'm sorry.
but that being said, I mean, the amendment to the contract is pretty straightforward. It's basically, you know, I mean, in essence, in summary, it's basically the amount and this, you know, just memorializes this is it between now and the end of the contract. And that's all we're trying to accomplish in this one, you know, and then if they want to talk about contract extensions, any other kind of nuanced stuff in there, we put that in its own conversation. So we're not delaying a rate increase if that's what they need, you know, on the fact that we need to make some language changes, which are a little bit tougher to negotiate through than just a straight rate increase.
And I think Councilman Backus's question to me too, but, you know, to see what the bill was a year ago for recycling.
Yeah, if
If
she-
she was getting money back or paying money there, because obviously, you know, we know what it's at right today, but.
If she can furnish a copy of an invoice, would be just enough to have the numbers there that we can quantify, the damages, so to speak.
I can reach out and ask her for that. And she may tell me too, when I have a look at that, my tonnages are off, you know, I need to readjust my, which is, I mean, I basically developed a quick spreadsheet model that I can go through and change a couple numbers and gives me a whole set of window analysis.
Yeah, tonnage is, that's gonna be important to put a number to it, but if you can get the price, you can at least give a percentage. You know, if you can say that, what's the percent change?
Yeah, the tipping fee increase, I think the biggest one that I saw in the tipping fee ballpark was about 10% one year and 7%, I think, in 18. And 19 is looking at going up single digit increase again. So they're not, I mean, their increases, I mean, they're not, but they're
But
not.
when you add them up, 10 plus 7
Right,
plus
right,
5.
absolutely. No, I mean, there's a
Some
changeover, but there were also a couple of years early on in the contract where they actually were reduced as well, but nominally.
And that's one of the things, you know, as far back as you can. It's a 5-year contract, correct?
I went through the start of the contract in 2014, so I pulled all the data in there is only relevant to the actual contract that we have in front of us.
Okay.
Yeah, well, the difficulty I have is these 5-year contracts on a job like this with all this volatility. That'd be tough, boy, I mean, to tell you, I wouldn't want to get involved with it.
It's a big gamble.
Yeah.
So-
On the other side, we guaranteed them a monopoly for 5 years, right? Like you have that benefit of,
Yeah, but if you're.
right?
Better have your numbers right.
Right, you're right, and it's tough, so.
But I'll get that all, and I'll make sure I get that all over to SRC prior to the meeting as well this week, and just to make sure that,
Well, they're all answers, and that's what we're looking for, you know?
yeah, if they have any number issues with the way it was presented, we can get that cleaned up before it gets released as part of the packet on Friday.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing is just a copy, I mean, of invoice that's not just a number that she was verbally given to
Be
us.
helpful to see.
That way, if, you know, a resident asks, you can say, well, here's documentation that led up to it.
Yeah, but I would like to see some invoices for the same time period a year ago.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll make a request out for that as well.
All right. Anything else to bring forward? One last thing before we leave. Dan, we haven't had a chance to talk to you since Saturday's meeting, but I do think I speak for the whole council with your professionalism. Greatly appreciated through this whole process anyway, so. And, you know, hopefully going forward just as well. So I want to thank you very much for everything.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you for considering me just as a finalist. It was an honor just to be selected as a finalist and go through the whole process. I learned a lot about, you know, pressure interviews and, you know, where I'm okay and where I need to work on a little bit of skill set development. But no, it was great to be just selected. I mean, kind of considering my background, kind of where I came from, you know, 6 years ago, I never in a million years thought I would be, you know, sitting there on Saturday interviewing. So it was just an honor to be selected as a finalist. and
You deserved to be there, Ken. You did the last
You earned
three,
it.
There's no
I
question about it.
appreciate that. I mean, it's, you know,
But within the top 3 of 50,
Yeah.
over 50, that's.
Pretty darn good.
that was my win on it. And my wife, when she was watching the vote, she came down and she did tell me she was slightly relieved. She's like, I'm excited to kind of have you back at home a little bit more. So even though she was committed, I did ask her, I said, you okay with me applying? And she was 100% supportive of it, but she did mention at the end, she was like, I'm kind of glad.
That
So,
was the question I had for you tonight when we first got here, so.
no, it's good. I mean, and again, I just appreciate, you know, being part of the process.
Yeah.
and being
You
considered.
just need a few more whiskers, that's all.
And to be honest too, when Aaron left, you know, and kind of talked about, you know, transitioning, I kind of felt the exact same way, that I was close, but just needed a little bit more experience just to be, you know, there, which is, you know, one of the reasons why, you know, last August I went back to start my MBA program was just to kind of shore up some of those areas I needed some work on. And, you know, now I need to, you know, a chance to maybe implement some of that learning that I've gotten through my MBA to get a little bit more experience on there, but.
The thing of it is, you picked up the ball really well when Aaron left.
Oh, I
There's no
appreciate
question about it. I was totally surprised by that. And,
Maybe
did a
he's
really
been
good
carrying
job.
that ball for a while.
and he's been carrying it very well.
Well, I'm excited, and I'll work with Patrick to transition whatever he needs over there. we'll
And
be
that's
a
the
full
thing too, he
resource.
needs you right now.
And I'm willing, I mean, and for me, it's like, you know, I'm willing to, whatever question he has, you know, it's an open door between me and him, and,
Yeah.
you know, I think we'll work together well, you know, moving forward, and, you know, do great things for the city, so I'm excited.
Do we have a timeframe for his onboarding or not?
I have not been told.
No, I'm sure,
That'd be a month, I bet.
I'm sure at least that, I
Yeah.
would think, anyway.
You know, he's gotta
No,
give
a lot of-
notice to
lot of
this, and he's
details
gotta
to
go
it.
through these.
Part of the contract, I know Bridget had sent over, I didn't get into that far to see what the proposed start date was. but-
Typically, that would be, I mean, usually in regular employment, we usually never recommend an employee resign a position until the contract or the hire is approved, and then that kind of sets, although when that contract is on for consideration, you typically will know, is it 4 weeks out? Usually, the contract that they're probably working under has a set, you know, it's usually isn't a 2-week turnaround. Usually, I think the last contract that Aaron had 4-week mandated if he was gonna leave, to get everything kind of transitioned over, because there's a lot of moving parts when you transition out of an organization.
I didn't even hear, do we have an acceptance?
That's the other question.
I
We
think
don't
it's still
know. This can all
conversation.
happen with the negotiations.
It's only Monday.
Right.
Let's ask.
No, it's true though.
Somebody might have heard something.
The email I got from her said still in the works.
Yeah.
It's not a,
Give her a week to work anyway.
it ain't over till it's over.
I know that.
All right. Hearing no other business, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Come on, that's his job.
Let's go, forget it.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.